Do you ever feel like your brain is tired in a way you can't explain? Not tired like you need sleep, but tired like you've been absorbing too much of something you can't even name. You didn't run a marathon. You didn't work a 14-hour shift. You barely left your chair, and still, there's this fog, this strange dullness in your head. Your thoughts feel slower. Your motivation, gone. And no matter how much you rest, it doesn't seem to reset. So you scroll a bit. Maybe you open YouTube, or TikTok, or a podcast, just to feel something. Distraction, stimulation, noise, anything. And for a few minutes, it works. You laugh at something dumb. You learn a random fact. You get a short spike of feeling. But then it's gone. And what's left behind is a strange mix of agitation and emptiness. That cycle of needing to escape but never actually arriving anywhere is something more and more people are describing. It's like we're living in a mental loop where nothing ever feels settled, like our brains are always processing but never digesting. And it's starting to show, not in dramatic breakdowns, but in the quieter symptoms. Difficulty concentrating, a constant background noise of anxiety, an inability to be alone with our thoughts without grabbing a screen, and a lingering sense that something inside us is off. The thing is, most of us don't talk about it because we're still functional. We still show up to work, reply to messages, keep up appearances. So we assume we're just being dramatic, or worse, that we're broken. But what if we're not broken at all? What if this isn't about willpower or laziness or some personal flaw? What if our brains are just overstimulated, chronically, continuously, invisibly overstimulated, and no one ever taught us how to deal with that? This is something we weren't built for, because overstimulation isn't always loud. It's not panic or chaos. Sometimes it feels like nothing, like scrolling for an hour and forgetting everything you just saw, like switching between 5 tabs and not caring about any of them, like watching a show while checking your phone, while texting someone back, and somehow still feeling bored. It's not that we don't want to focus. It's that our attention is being fractured 1,000 times a day, and every fracture leaves a mark. And over time, that does something to us. It changes the way we feel. It dulls our internal sense of direction. It makes rest feel unproductive, silence feel awkward, boredom feel unbearable. We've spent years adapting to a world that never stops feeding us input, without learning how to process any of it. And now, we're saturated. Not in the obvious ways, not in chaos or crisis, but in the quiet, creeping way that makes you feel numb without knowing why. This isn't just a tech problem. This is an emotional and psychological shift that's reshaping how we experience the world and how we experience ourselves. And maybe the scariest part is that it's happening so gradually, so silently, that most of us don't even realize we're drowning in stimulation until we try to stop. The strange thing is, no one warned us this would feel like this. We were told the internet would connect us, that technology would make life easier, that more access, more content, more information would make us smarter, faster, better. And maybe, for a while, it did. But what no one explained is that connection isn't the same as intimacy. That stimulation isn't the same as nourishment, and that attention, the currency of the internet, isn't the same as presence. Somewhere along the way, quantity replaced quality. We started trading depth for speed, reflection for reaction, solitude for constant input. And the scariest part is, we didn't even notice the shift happening because it didn't feel dramatic. It felt convenient. Why sit with a thought when you can swipe to the next one? Why feel your sadness when there's 100 videos ready to make you laugh? Why reflect when you can consume? Little by little, distraction became our default state. Not because we're weak, not because we're lazy, but because we're human. And we're living in an environment that's been designed to hijack our attention and outsource our emotions. Think about it. Every time you feel slightly bored, your hand reaches for your phone. Every time you feel slightly anxious, you open a tab, a feed, a reel. Every time there's a pause in your day, between meetings, between thoughts, between breaths, you fill it, not with rest, but with content. We've become masters at escaping discomfort before it even has the chance to appear. But the truth is, we're not escaping it. We're burying it under noise. And over time, that unprocessed discomfort, the thoughts we never finish, the emotions we never feel, the pauses we never take, starts to collect somewhere inside us. It becomes tension in the body. It becomes anxiety that has no name. It becomes this invisible weight we carry, not because of one big traumatic event, but because of 1,000 micro moments we never let ourselves land in. This is why so many of us feel tired all the time, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, existentially. Because when every moment of your day is filled with input, when there's no space left for stillness, your brain stops distinguishing what actually matters. Everything becomes noise, even the things that once felt meaningful. And that's the part no one told us about. That overstimulation doesn't just make you distracted, it makes you disoriented. You stop trusting your internal signals. You forget what rest actually feels like. You forget what your own emotions sound like beneath the algorithm. So we keep going. We keep performing functionality, but inside, we're slowly disconnecting from the core of who we are. Not because we've failed, but because we've adapted to survive in an environment that was never meant to feel like home. The hardest part about all this is that it doesn't look like suffering from the outside. It doesn't scream. It doesn't collapse. It blends in. You wake up. You check your phone. You go through your day. You answer messages. You get things done. Maybe you laugh. Maybe you even have a good day. But somewhere in between, there's this quiet sense of absence, like a part of you is watching from a distance. And because nothing's technically wrong, you convince yourself it's just a phase. You tell yourself you're just tired, that you need a break, that everything's fine. But it keeps coming back. This invisible tension, this inability to feel grounded, this sense that life is happening around you, but not with you. And so we find ways to numb it. We call it unwinding when we spend 4 hours scrolling. We say we're catching up on content when we binge entire seasons we don't even enjoy. We tell ourselves we're relaxing, but it doesn't feel like rest. It feels like zoning out. like escaping without knowing what we're running from. We've gotten so good at performing normal that we forget to check in with how we actually feel. We assume that because we're still moving, we're okay. But movement isn't the same as direction. And silence, especially internal silence, isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just disconnection. The truth is, we're afraid to pause. Not because we don't want rest, but because rest feels foreign now. It feels empty, unproductive, exposed. When you've been overstimulated for long enough, stillness can feel like withdrawal. You sit in the quiet, and all the things you've been suppressing start to rise. The questions, the loneliness, the anxiety that was never gone, just buried under noise. So we reach for the screen again, not out of laziness, but because it's the only coping mechanism we've ever really had. And this is where the real danger lives, not in the apps themselves, not even in the content, but in the way we've come to confuse stimulation with self-regulation. We've started using digital noise to manage emotions that were never meant to be outsourced. Feel awkward? Open your phone. Feel anxious? Watch something. Feel disconnected? Swipe until something gives you a little spark of validation. And sure, it helps. Briefly. But it's not healing. It's a loop. A loop that feels normal because everyone around us is in it too. We see people posting, sharing, smiling, and we assume they're thriving. But what if they're just as tired? What if we're all silently compensating, pretending this lifestyle isn't eating away at us? Because admitting otherwise would mean facing what we've lost. And what we've lost isn't just time or attention. It's something deeper, something harder to name, something that sounds like presence, something that feels like being here. So where do we go from here? Honestly, it starts with naming what's really happening. You're not lazy, you're not broken. You're overstimulated, and your brain is tired, not from doing too little, but from feeling too much, too fast, too often. We don't need another app to fix us. We need space, to feel without numbing, to rest without guilt, to be with ourselves without immediately trying to escape. Maybe that's the quiet rebellion, choosing depth in a world that runs on speed, choosing presence even if it feels unfamiliar at first. It won't always feel good, but it might feel real. And that's how we start remembering who we are underneath the noise.